I did have
No?
one in advance, so I can maybe do that one first if that's easier.
Yeah, please, Rhys.
Yeah, so one was sent through to me, which was predominantly around is the use of table service needed, and under the current guidelines and regulations, then the answer to that is really yes. And I can take arguments from both sides really in terms of um, staff risk of serving and other things. But the main point of table service and the importance for that is it avoids queuing, it avoids mixing of households, whether they're at the bar, whether they're waiting elsewhere. So there are other pinch points that are created when the provision of table service isn't provided. Now, we may see changes in that as we progress through these regulations. In the current regulations, there is dates that talk about reviews for Welsh Government to do this, but under the current provision, then table service is required. Now, how you deliver that table service, be it whether an app is assisting you in your ordering, or whether it is a customer that is, sort of calling or sort of gesturing for a staff member to come over, there are measures that you could work around that to ensure that staff contact to the customers on the table is kept to a minimum. Obviously, there are going to be things where staff members are wearing masks and face coverings and such like to ensure they're protected at that time. But that is what would be required under the current regulation at the moment. I think with the provision of having some form of advanced booking as well, this should hopefully aid in having less queuing and an easier method of doing that. But if there are any questions people have about what would be acceptable as table service or acceptable as measures to control that, then I'm happy to expand on or discuss any particular points people have on that. But the question was, is it really needed? Then currently in the regulations is yes, it is.
Thank you, Rhys. And has anyone got anything they want to come back up, particularly around that point, around the sort of table service element for Rhys?
Yeah, Nigel, thanks for that, Rhys. Just where it was the case that the customers effectively wanted to order at the bar, because we do see this sometimes. Even though people have checked in using test and etc. Certainly when they first come in, some customers just like to go to the bar, and if it were the case that the proper socially distanced measures were put in place for that one or two people to order at the bar and then take their place at a table and then be served at the table, do you think that that's acceptable, Rhys?
Under the current provision, I'd have to say no, because it does having a single point of sort of entry. So at that point, you'd be looking at greeting the customer, taking the track and trace information at that point, and then they should be directed to the most suitable table that you would require them to sit at, in order so that group, be it a full, be it another number, would best suit how you would want to serve them. It's difficult because I know there are still going to be customers that are expecting the ability to walk in and maybe pick and choose their table and do that. But under the current sort of guidance that we've got, it's advising that pre-booking is first, but the walk-ins are available to accommodate that, and I think that I have to stress that we're not going to be looking at not allowing walk-ins, but it's about controlling them at that point of entry, and then sort of directing the customer as to where and how you want them to interact within your venue, rather than the opposite way around.
Thanks, Rhys.
Thanks, Rhys. Thanks for that question, Nick. Has anyone else got anything for Rhys around sort of table service and obviously what's been discussed so far? I'll take that as a no. Has anyone got any other questions in relation to sort of COVID guidance, laws with regard to licensed premises?
Well, I got another one.
Carry on, Nick.
Yeah, it's in that section, who can attend, and the that line, if I'm reading it right, where the social distancing on a table of 4 may not always be feasible. Rhys, do you anticipate to sort of review, or not review, but enforce that, or make an assessment of that as and when you come across it?
So I think the important thing to consider here is, and I think there's been a slight update. I'm just looking to try and find it, to the wording under the FAQ provision in the Welsh Government this morning, or it could have happened before. But it says, where up to 4 people from different households are sat together at a table, every effort should be made to maximise distance between each other at the table. Now, when myself or colleagues are looking at doing compliance visits, I think we have to be a little bit realistic in, is it reasonable to have, let's say, because it's written elsewhere, 2 meters between four customers at a table? And the answer to that is probably no, because otherwise all venues would be looking at considerably reduced capacities, despite the fact they're at reduced capacities now. I think what we're looking at in terms of where it says to maximise a distance between each other, what we're looking at is, you know, let's be realistic here. 4 single households can share a table. That's fine. We're looking at, if we're going out and seeing more than 4 at the table, we're probably going to be looking to have a chat with you know, management there to say, look, what provisions did you put in place to ensure that 6 there are sharing the same house? They are a single household, because that is the only relaxation around 4. And then let's be honest, what we're looking at is, how are people interacting on the table? So, for example, if we're seeing people interacting in a way that isn't promoting safety risk and promoting sort of minimizing the risk of spread within the business, then I think we're going to be having conversations about staff just trying to control the customer's behavior at that table, rather than saying, walking around with a tape measure or a 2-meter stick and saying, look, you've got to push those tables further apart. You know, it's difficult enough in venues to have 2 meters between customers at one table to customers at another table. And let's be honest, that's the important factor here. Let's ensure we've got good social distancing, good spacing between customers when they're sat at a table to customers sat at another table, because that allows staff to flow through the business effectively. It allows people to get up and move from their table to go use other facilities in the venue, and it encourages good and sensible flow from entrance to exit, and it allows a business to use a one-way system, for example, more effectively. If people are a bit cramped between tables, that's where our risk is, because then when customers are sat at a table without a face covering, those staff members are much closer to other tables than they are to the one that they're actually serving. So I think the important factor here is, let's look at controlling customer behavior at the table of 4, but let's ensure that the distancing between the next table of 4 is the important thing.
Great, thanks, Rhys. Can I just ask a quick question on that? So technically, a table of 8 would be allowed if it was 2 households?
A single household. So they're clear in the definition of a single household, not an extended household.
Right.
So
okay. Thanks.
the regulation talks about an extended household of one family interacting with another family. Predominantly now, we see the wording of extended households to do with social interaction and outside interaction. By that, I mean outside of a business. So it's one family can form a bubble or an extended household with another. When we're looking at a regulated premises, for example, it is using the words single household. So, for example, that would be a family, 2 adults and maybe 4 children. A number of those children could be over the age of 11, in which point they would account to the number of that table. And it's when we're in that scenario that you would be eligible to sit at the same table. You know, one can make the argument that students, they do form a single household. But then the other bits in the regulations and the guidance talk about how you go about proving that or having some form of backup to support that provision. And I think that's when we'd be looking at businesses to use their sort of advanced booking measures just to warn people, look, if you turn up and you're trying to sit at a table of 6, you know, then be prepared to provide us with some form of ID. Doesn't have to be a driving license or something like that. It could be a copy of some form of agreement or something that they will live together, like a tenancy agreement, for example. Because there's understanding that students may not have changed their address on their driving license, you know, just because they've come down here to study. It is a bit difficult, but those are the sort of ideas that they should really expect if they want to sit on a table that's larger than a 4. You know, a business could say, look, sorry, we're only accommodating tables of 4s, and unless it's like a family scenario, and that is entirely up to the business to really do that. But in terms of a regulated business setup, it's a single household, or you're looking at the 4 from different households.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Rhys. Anyone got any other questions with regard to that? No, there's no one sticking their hand up. Or are there any other questions that maybe that the people have for Rhys?
I'll go again.
Go on, Nick.
Yeah, just TTP, as you call it in your document there, Rhys. And can you just clarify for everybody that's listening? So what you're saying is obviously the main emphasis is on the test, trace, protect. But that the NHS app, as it were, that's like an add-on, not necessarily a requirement now. Even less, I guess. I know some businesses have developed a QR code that automatically does the TTP, but doesn't necessarily. Well, that provides the same thing as the NHS app. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah. So what we're looking at is the TTP is basically test, trace, protect. It's not the easiest thing to roll off the tongue, but essentially it's your information, the data that we're required for customers. So essentially what we're looking at is the provisions of the NHS app that provides like guidance and a to the customer as an individual. It isn't necessarily the foolproof mechanism for the data required under the regulation for the business to collect. So what we'd be looking at is whether or not, because obviously before the NHS barcode allocation bit came out, a number of businesses were using other bits or other mechanisms to ensure the data was collected about customers for that. Because the important thing to remember here is if there is a requirement for call handlers or people who are working within the TTP team to contact a business requiring this information, getting the data from the NHS app isn't as straightforward as it would be imagined. So there is the request that, and the part in the regulation is that the business has the name, the telephone number, the time of entry, and that sort of information held for the period of time, so it can be supported in requesting that information. There's also a bit of information in there about making sure that the information provided from the customer is real or valid. Now, you know, that is a little bit difficult in itself, but the idea is there is so that we don't have about 20 Mickey Mouses and Donald Ducks walking around Cardiff city centre on a Friday night checking into pubs that we can't trace back to any bit of information. So it's really there to say the NHS app can be used as a support tool for the customer to check in on and use their app, because that will provide them some alert information to the customer. But from the business compliance perspective, we're looking at ensuring that there is information gathered under the other mechanisms, be it your own QR code, be it a book that is taking down this information at point of arrival, or other processes that may be more streamlined for the business to ensure that that's available if it was needed.
Thanks, Rhys. Just one question for me on that point. So if you got people that come into your premises and you check their ID, do you have to record what ID you've checked? I'm not saying list everything, but if I've checked a utility bill of a table of 4, do I need to record the fact that I've checked a utility bill and a driving license, or is it just a case of ID has to be looked at?
I think it's more of a point of, let's be realistic. There's a number of added burdens and expectations placed on businesses at the moment. That's understood. The idea of arriving and just being able to turn up, grab a drink or grab some food, and like you used to at a pub is a sort of quick, streamlined process is difficult now. There are processes and steps that need to be put in place before that happens. I don't think it's necessary to add other layers to what's already a process that is going to take some time. So I think the important thing is the person taking that information at the business, are they satisfied that the information they've got is valid and reasonable? If they are, then let's go with taking the information that's needed and go from there. If there is any doubt as to checking that for validity of names, then just ask. And as soon as it's checked, I don't think it needs to be documented what form of ID you checked. I think it's just a case of someone being able to say, yeah, I've just checked the information you provided. I'm satisfied now. The information you provided is accurate. That's the main purpose of that. It's not to start keeping reams and reams of data about what you've checked. It's more about the information is accurate, and that's the purpose.
Lovely, thanks, Rhys. Appreciate that. Anyone else got any questions for Rhys?
Hiya, I've got one.
Hi, Alyssa.
Hiya. So where do we sit if someone refuses to give us that information? So we're obviously wanting people to use our app and the track and trace. We have older clientele who might find that a bit more difficult and get to the point where they outright refuse and get a bit flustered. Where do we then stand as the proprietor that needs that information? Where are our rights on that?
So do you mean they're refusing to give you any information for track and trace, as in they've...
Yeah, it does get to that point where it's, oh, I don't know how to use an app, or I'd rather not, and it just becomes a bit much. Where do we stand on that?
I would say the simplest thing is there a fallback system? Because I know a number of, let's take for example a club premises certificate. A number of their clientele may not have smartphones. They may not have the ability to check in on a QR code. I think the important thing there is, can you just take a log of who they are and a contact telephone number and a time that they arrived? If someone isn't willing to provide the very basic information that's required from the regulation, then in principle they should be thinking about why they're wanting to go to your business. Most people now should realise that in order to go into a business, there is a fundamental minimum level of information they need to pass on. If they're unwilling to do that, then then the business can't comply with the requirement for it, and that person is knowingly trying to enter a premises and not provide information at all. There are other risks associated with that I think are pretty obvious in terms of, you know, having someone that you can't ever provide information on to track and trace. You know, why would they refuse to do that? You know, it's under the current provisions that realistically it's something we've all got to do when we go somewhere. There isn't a one answer that everyone has to do. It doesn't have to be a QR code. It doesn't have to be electronic. It can be as simple as a diary that backs up, for example, the customers that can't do it on a QR code or that system. So, you know, a diary system or just some other form of written documentation that says the time and who they are is perfectly acceptable for a scenario like that where they couldn't do the electronic version.
Can I just follow up on that, Rhys? And I think it sort of bears out what Alyssa's saying there. I mean, in town, there's quite a few of us that have regulars, like daytime regulars. Quite often they will be people that, luckily for them, are not working anymore, and but they like to spend their time in the premises. I mean, once we've got their details, either electronically or on paper, so if I'm just thinking about a QR code now in the Philharmonic. So they come in and they've got to complete that. And actually, it is quite time consuming by the time we've got all the information in there. If it's an out and out regular that myself as the manager knows, and I know I have their details, as long as they've effectively just, I don't know, scanned the QR code, is that sufficient, or do they need to go through that whole process every time? And do we need to be, I guess what I'm boiling this down to is, do I need to check their proof of address every time? I'm thinking probably not, am I?
Not. I don't think it needs to be checked every time. As in, if you know that customer is a regular customer and they've checked in using the measures that you ask your guests to check in, you know, if as long as you can be confident that the information they provided hasn't changed, then I think that would be fine. The process really is to make sure that, you know, when someone checks in, the telephone number, the date of their visit, their arrival time is collected and retained. So, you know, for example, if it's a regular and they've done it once and you know who they are and every time they're there, then whichever method suits you for recording that information can be done. But it's just about making sure that, for example, you know, the main thing is their name and telephone number and time are the same and retained. So.
Okay, great. That's thanks.
Hi, I got a question. It's James from Kiwis. So for the first couple of days, we've been taking everyone's information as per and names and full addresses. So just for clarity, we don't actually need to take their address every time.
My understanding is not specifically their address, their telephone number, the date of visit, their arrival time must be collected and retained. Yeah. But
when it comes to larger groups from one household, yes, it's taken the proof of that, as you've alluded to earlier.
The purpose of the address there is for proof that they are a single household.
And dwelling together.
Yeah. So that's the main bit there. So it's about being confident that the larger group that you're sitting are all sat together and are from the same single household. That's the purpose of the address validation there. For example, if it was two friends that were sat on a table of two, for the purposes of the TTP provision, it would be their telephone number, their date, their arrival, and their name.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Anyone else got any questions there for Rhys? So I know Rob Gunston from the police licensing team has come online. Thanks, Rob. Has anyone got any questions, perhaps if not for Rhys, but maybe for Rob from a policing point of view? Seems not. Rob, is there anything that perhaps you might want to sort of impart? Is there any policy that that has sort of come down from your bosses as such that you might want to communicate towards the licensees?
No, it's. Can you hear me all right? I'm having some issues with my tech here.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. Okay. No, not as such. Just picking up on what Rhys was saying there. I mean, really, I think this all comes down to due diligence, really, and just making sure that on a practical level, should premises be approached to provide details of customers, and that information is available. I appreciate it's difficult. It's new for all of us, but yeah, just take a practical approach to it. And if you're satisfied on a common sense level that you've got sufficient information, then hopefully that'll be sufficient. Yeah, there's nothing else from me in relation to that. It's good to see premises opening up. It's good to see the city centre getting back to some degree of normality. I know in the intervening period there are a few premises that regrettably won't be opening up, so we're all advised, and that's a real shame. But I'm sure if we all work together, we can establish some sort of normality and have some sort of decent run into the Christmas period and get the economy up and running again. That is our view, something which we want to support.
Lovely. We'll starting with this weekend, Rob, will there anyone from the licensing team be out and about for some support if need be?
I'm still waiting confirmation on that. Now, Justin may be privy to that. I've not had that discussion with him today. But yeah, we'll advise of that as and when we've got some sort of confirmation.
Okay, lovely. And again, Rhys, I don't know, and I know Dan's on as well. Will there be sort of anyone on hand over the course of the weekend for some support if need be? Yeah.
So so part obviously of my role in this is to deliver a compliance and enforcement process with this. Now, when I say that, advice is the largest part of that. So yes, I'll be looking at making provisions that we will have staff available. I'm going to aim for pretty much every weekend, and that will be a Friday night and a Saturday night, and hopefully a Saturday daytime provision as well, going forward. The idea with that is that obviously we might not always be 100% visible to everybody, and I can't guarantee they'll be on the end of a phone if someone wants to ring them. But we will be, check-in and be able to discuss with businesses if we do turn up and they want to have a chat about things. I think the important thing to see is, the majority of enforcement action, be it with an improvement notice or a closure notice or something that's happened previously and going forward, these have all been around where the layout, design, or seating arrangement of businesses have not been sort of sufficient in terms of providing enough space for people to be apart, or where we've seen sort of lax approaches to face coverings and such like that. I think we've been around a lot of these regulations in some way, shape or form for quite some time now, so a number of these will almost become second nature to people, certainly the provision of face coverings and things like that. I think the important thing is that we've had a period where businesses have been closed, and it's good now to see that we can start opening, trading and providing those services again. But it's about remembering what went on beforehand, what good work businesses did to ensure compliance before, making sure that outside table spacing and inside table spacing if the structure has changed at all during the 2-week period that they've been closed for cleaning. Make sure those provisions are well rehearsed, documented, and all members of staff know a layout. You know, a big thing we see for outside seating is it changes from one day to the next. People need to understand that once you've got your layout, make everyone aware of how you want it to be. Keep it as consistent as possible, so that if one member of staff puts it out one day and a different one the next, they know exactly what they're doing. And then officers, when they come by to look at their compliance, everything looks, you know, very similar, very rehearsed. You know, it's good practice to see that. You know, and especially with inside any additional changes. If someone wants someone to come around and run through something and check on a premise, that's not a problem. Just ask us. You know, what we prefer to be doing is dealing with businesses proactively, but in the grand scheme of things, we've got hundreds, thousands of businesses in Cardiff, that to get round them all in, you know, a period of time before these regulations come out or within the first week is sadly impractical. But if businesses want us to come and have a look, then let us know, and we'll try and make all the efforts we can do to support you in what you want us to have a look at. You know, but then, you know, just remember all the things that had happened before. There are some changes, and some of the documentation that we've put out will highlight some of those changes. But, you know, your risk assessment provisions and everything that went in place previously, you know, should all be should all be sort of making sure that the same protection is there as it was before.
Lovely, thanks, Rhys. Any more for any more? There's no one sort of click the hands up button, and if anyone's physically putting their hands up, unfortunately I can't see it. If there is any questions, please click the hands up button and we'll acknowledge it. No.
Nick?
Yeah, Nick, go on.
Yeah, just a follow up to that one, Rhys. I mean, would you want me to put out some kind of email with your kind offer there of proactive visits?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm happy to. You know, if someone wants to get in contact, or you know, maybe they just want to ask a question that they haven't thought of now, or maybe they've got a plan coming up for something, you know, in the run up to the Christmas period. Maybe they're looking to do a specific type of day, you know, for something. It was going to lead me on to my next point, was if someone is planning, for example, Beaujolais Day or something similar, and you've got any concerns, then please ask. You know, we do know that some venues have sort of themed nights, for example, or themed you know, events is maybe the wrong word, but I'm going to use it because it's a term everyone at least understands. If they've got any questions or concerns about it, then please ask, because otherwise what happens is we see something promoted on the internet, the style of which is promoted might not be in accordance with how they're going to run the event. So then we're already having to, you know, look as though we're chasing a business and we're being a bit of, you know, on the enforcement front because of the way in which we've been introduced to this, you know, sort of evening that is going to happen. It's far easier for us to talk about these things with someone, have an understanding about how the day and evening is going to be delivered, so we can give you the best advice. You know, for example, some of these things that people want to do are going to fall into the category of a gathering or of an event that's organized, and then we're in the region of it potentially being limited to 15 people indoors. Okay, so you know, it's always best for us to have a discussion about that, because if all of a sudden you've thought, well, I can host this and do it in my venue, great. But if there is a limiting factor, it means you're going to be limited to 15, and I'm not sure that's financially viable for a lot of people at the moment, but for certain things that they want to do. So by all means, the important thing is to have those conversations with us so that we can discuss the provisions that might need to be put in place for it. because we don't want to be turning up and saying, no, you can't do this, because we know that there's money has gone into organising an event, there's money gone into potentially already promoting it, money might have already gone into arranging certain other people to be involved in it. So it's important that we discuss these things to make sure that you don't fall under a different category within the regulations, and then you're limited on capacity because of the indoor nature of it.
Lovely, thanks, Rhys. Rob, you had your hand up, Rob Gunston.
Yeah, it's whoops, hang on, steady. Yeah, it's just to echo what Rhys is saying there. I think it's important that premises are aware of what their promoters are promoting and what is going out on their social media feeds. We have had instances where people have contacted the police to say, this premises is doing X, Y, and Z, and quite rightly, when we've contacted them, what is actually going on is either not what is being advertised and therefore not an issue, or the premises have turned around and said, well, I'm not aware of this, but rest assured I'll look into it and come back to us. It basically reduces work for everyone, really, if what goes out there in terms of publicity reflects what is happening at the premises. Certainly from mine and Rhys's point of view, it's a less work for us to have to go into to just clarify what's going on. And again, to echo what Rhys is saying, if there are any concerns, if premises want to put an event on and they're not sure, then please contact us. It will just streamline things, and people at the moment haven't got time to waste, both in the hospitality trade and the likes of Rhys's organisation and our organisation, going into things which we don't need to go into. So just please contact us if you've got any concerns, and we will give whatever advice we can.
Fab, thanks, Rob. And I also, from a personal point of view, I think we're really fortunate in Cardiff that we've got some departments who will promote help, but will actually help as well. So I know that the things that have been put forward by both Rhys and Rob will be followed up. If anyone does have a question, if anyone does want some advice, I think basically all we need to do is to come through to them, or even to me if you wanted me to sort of act on your behalf on the premises and ask the question on your behalf if need be. Feel free to do that. Any further questions?
I think the important thing to note, sorry Nick, I'll come back in a sec. The important thing to really note is that by discussing these things with us, it's not that we want to be a barrier to what you want to do. Okay, the important thing I want to express in this is if we don't know that an event or a type of evening is being run, and someone sees some form of promotion of it, they're only going to see what goes out online on social media. They're going to contact us and they'll say, do you know about this? Our answer could be no, not a clue. Then all we've got to go on is the very initial bit that's online and the person's complaint. Whereas if someone has proactively tried to come to us and say, look, can I just run this past you? This is how I'm going to do it. This is, it's no different to us really what we do generally. It's just we're putting it as this sort of style of evening. If we know in advance and that person comes to us and have seen this, then we can immediately be confident in the knowledge that we've already spoken to the business. We know if they're going to adopt any new form of management for that particular day, and we know how things are going to run. If we turn up to look at these things, I don't want it to be always seen that it's a negative. Okay, we might find something because we're a fresh pair of eyes at a venue, seeing something that the businesses have been trying to keep on top of all day, and us turning up is a fresh pair of eyes, and we can either provide advice, or if something is of an issue, we might need to look at it from a different perspective. But the important thing is by working around these things, we can deal with any sort of queries from the public about an event up front, and secondly, we can pass the advice and information to the business when they're looking to set up that day, so there aren't going to be any surprises if we do turn up to have a look at it. You know, that's the important thing.
Lovely, thanks, Rhys. Nick, did you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, just wanted to check with the earlier answer you gave, Rhys, about when I asked about the, you know, where feasible or whatever. Did you mention that has any wording changed? Like the, you know, the link that Will sent out with that note of yours. There's no wording that's changed anywhere that we need to be aware of, is there?
Not in the advice document that we sent out. I think that I'm looking at it now. The majority of that is pretty much the same, because what we did was, where it talks about tables of 4, we've taken the sort of wording that the Welsh Government were looking at. And I think there was a webinar that I think that was hosted by UK Hospitality fairly recently, where a number of the points were discussed, because upon initial reading you could look at it from a number of different ways. I think the idea is to be realistic in what we aim to achieve with this. It was just brought to our attention, and having looked through things, that if you went to the frequently asked questions part of the Welsh Government website, there was a slight changing in some wording, and the wording on the frequently asked questions bit now reads, where up to 4 people from different households are sat together at a table, every effort should be made to maximize distance between each other at the table. They don't use phrasing like 2 meters. They don't use that phrasing anymore. And I think the important bit here is to maximize distance between each other at the table is really, let's look at how people are interacting with each other. You know, let's look at what's happening. Have we got everyone sort of trying to get up on their tables, trying to, you know, start hugging and doing, you know, everything else? Let's try and have some, you know, bit of, you know, orderly control over what people are doing at the table. Because if we were to say, look, you've got to sit there, you've got to sit there, you can't move your chair, you can't do this, it's not going to become practical or feasible for a business to keep on top of, and to maintain any form of orderly business structure, I think.
Lovely, thanks, thanks, Rhys and Nick. I'm going to wind the meeting up if there's no more questions. Nick, your hand's up on the clicker. Have you got another one? No. Okay, fab, thanks. Yeah, in that case, I think only just 2 things really then from me. One is to just thank Rhys for coming on, and I know the licensing team are on as well, and Rob from the police. And I think perhaps to echo what the First Minister has said, and that is around perhaps think what you should do as opposed to what you could do, and probably, you know, they're doing the right thing and not pushing the boundaries, probably, I suspect, which is difficult sometimes when you're trying to make a buck. But the guys are there for support. I'm more than happy to take any questions sort of via email, nigel@4cardiff.com. I'm willing to pass those on and ask those questions for you. Feel free to do that. And yeah, if that's it from me. If there's nothing else, we'll wind it up.
I think the only other bit to maybe add is, if anyone's got any questions about use of screens or partitions in certain layouts, then by all means discuss that, because there may be more food-led businesses on the chat here today that might have some questions about that they might think about later on. Then by all means, you know, send those across. You know, so there is that other section where it talks about other measures, but you know, let's make sure that we keep it in you know, let's keep our distancing and our layouts as a key priority. And if anyone's got any questions about the other measures or screen use and positions and and designs, then by all means, just let us know.
Lovely. Thanks, Rhys. Again, thanks again for offering up the service. Yeah, thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Yep. Cheers all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.